Hello, buddy. Welcome back to Tin Man's Court Channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm reacting to my second scary storyteller channel, and I picked out a Shining Gold Tales video for you guys, titled Four True Creepy Neighbor Horror Stories. So without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road and in the bag, shall we? Okay, here we go.
This happened in Florida, somewhere between 2004 and 2006.
Okay.
I was around 7 years old at the time, and my sister was a few years older than me. I'm a French American, and I grew up overseas, so visiting my grandparents in America has always been an interesting experience.
Oh, for sure.
They had a neighbor who was a very old, skinny man, from what I can remember, and he had a wife. We never saw her much. We would sometimes see her trimming the hedges and occasionally staring at my sister while we ran around in the backyard.
I know that must have been amazing to leave France and go see your American grandparents down in Florida. I know it must be a change of scenery, but you get used to it quickly. And I know you have a fun time with them, but it'll be also creepy just to see a neighbor that's like thin and just staring at you all the time. I mean, I would be getting that little kid nervousness and asking my grandparents, does that neighbor have a problem with him? Because I'll be freaked out. But anyway, let's continue with this person's story, see what happens next.
My grandparents used to live in a different house that was only a few houses down from their current place. I remember having left a few toys in the old house, and I always wanted to go back and get them, but I never did. I remember on several occasions, the old man would try to coax me and my older sister into his house. Sometimes he would try it with us separately, and other times he would try to get us while we were together. I was just a little kid back then, but I do remember certain things in detail. There was one encounter with our neighbor that I'll never forget. One time I was playing out in the backyard, looking for lizards, a typical Florida pastime, when I saw the neighbor waving at me. I remember watching him for a bit before trotting over to him. He seemed to be signaling to me to come into his garage. Right before I did so, my older sister appeared behind me and grabbed my hand. She told me off for almost going onto our neighbor's property. When I told her what happened, I remember she looked over at him. The old man began to say things like, "Your dog is in my garage. She wandered in here. Come get her. I'll give you some candy," and stuff like that.
Okay, right off the bat, he sounds like one of those petos, if you know what I mean, who likes young girls, but is trying to lure one of them in the garage, saying that their dog got in there. But you don't ask him or tell him that you got candy if you get him out. That'd be a red flag for me right there. At this point, I'll be telling the grandparents about what has been going on and see if they can call the cops on this dude, because it's very strange that he tries to lure two young girls into his house. And what does his wife think about this? Who knows, right?
After a few minutes of that, I had grown bored, and I just sat down on the grass. I remember my older sister leaning down a bit to speak into my ear, and she said something like this: "When I say so, we run." Got it? I just nodded in return, wondering why we would need to run. As my older sister stared the man down, he soon began to start walking out of his garage. The man began to talk about candy, our dog, and other things as he approached us. I remember looking at him in a confused manner as he got closer. Seeing this, my sister whispered, "Now," to me, and we both got up and began to run back to the house. The man was screaming at us to come back. Once we ran inside, my older sister told my parents what happened, and they confirmed that we should never talk to the man again. Also, the dog was in the house the entire time. She was fine. Back then, I thought it was just a weird encounter, and I tossed it aside. I didn't understand the severity until much later. Several times after that, I remember the neighbor trying to get me to follow him into his house. One time, I had gone looking for golf balls, and I wandered too close to his house. This would always end with me tempting death, and waiting till he was a few seconds away from grabbing me before I darted back to my house. Either that or my older sister would come to rescue me. When I was around 9 years old in 2008, the man died. From what? I don't remember, but I think it had something to do with his heart. To be honest, at the time, I didn't care at all. I was happy he was gone, so my older sister and I wouldn't get creeped on anymore. Now that I think about it all these years later, it was very creepy, but at the time, I didn't think much of it since I was so young. What I wonder about now is why he wanted my older sister and I to come into his house. Why did he lie about the dog? And what was he planning to do with us?
Believe me, that all that is better buried in the ground, because it seems like he was planning on luring you to his house and probably do some nasty things to you. That's why. That's what he might have been planning on doing. But since you never went into his house and he started to make advantages towards you, we will never know what he was planning. But like the parents said, do not even go near him. But I would have still been calling the cops and report his sorry tale, because that's just not right of him luring innocent girls to his house with the promise of having candy or their dog, and their dog was in the house the entire time. Now, I agree with them on the good news that he passed away, but I wouldn't speak badly about the dead. Even though he acted weird in life, it's best to just move on and forget about him, because you definitely don't want him to keep showing up in your nightmares or haunting you. But I'm just glad that they're okay and they didn't get grabbed or assaulted by this dude. So let's get on to story number 2, shall we?
This happened to me when I was 11. I was staying at a friend's house who we'll call Kit.
Okay.
Kit was one of those cool kids in school who was always getting into trouble. Looking back, I don't understand how I managed to remain friends with him for so long, because I was anything but cool.
Hey, you can still be cool when you hang out with all the friends that don't do drugs, alcohol, or do stupid stuff to where you get in trouble with the cops all the time. So I don't see how in the world you're staying with him either. I would have ended a friend relationship with this person a long time ago.
One night, I was staying over at his place on a Friday after school, and we started playing one-on-one soccer in the backyard. After playing for about 20 minutes, he asked me if I'd heard of a game called Mop. I hadn't, so he explained the way the game worked to me. You hide by the road somewhere, and when someone walks or drives past, you shout the word Mop, hoping to get some kind of reaction.
I never heard of this game either, but that sounds stupid. Because if you step out and yell, "Mop," you never know, you might make a driver of a car distracted and they might run into a stop sign or into another person's car right in front of them. So you definitely don't want to be involved in something like that at all, or you'll get in trouble.
I suppose the game could be known by any other name, but the word was Mop. Why? I don't know, and I didn't care to ask. I agreed to play, so we went down to his front yard and looked up and down the road to see if there was anyone heading our way. I should note that Kit's house wasn't on a main road, so only residents would be the ones going past. At the end of Kit's street, about 20 houses down, was the bush, so I wasn't expecting many people to pass by. I hid behind the garbage bins that stand by the driveway fence, and Kit was hiding on the opposite side in the garden. We positioned ourselves like that so both ends of the street would be in view, and we could see anybody passing by. At that point, it was about 4 p.m., so it was still light out, which to me made the game sound like less fun. About 2 minutes in, a car drove by, so Kit shouted Mop. Nothing happened, which was no surprise. I knew somebody driving by wouldn't be able to hear us. Not long after, a man and a woman were walking their dog, and as they were about to walk out of my side, Kit shouted Mop. The man and woman stopped and looked around confused for about 5 seconds, then they started walking again. That was the exact reaction that I was expecting. This went on for a while, and I was really starting to get bored. I remember asking Kit if we could stop a couple times, but he basically called me a baby, and we continued playing. As I said before, Kit was a cool kid, and I just wanted to fit in.
But like I said earlier, you can fit in with other kids that are not acting all dangerously all the time. and make bad choices in their lives. I don't care if he called me a baby. I would have been saying, this ain't cool or fun anymore. I'm leaving, going back home. And if he decides to do that by himself, let him face the consequences of somebody getting mad of him scaring him.
I continued playing without complaining anymore. Eventually, I noticed a homeless man making his way over. Kit couldn't have seen him yet, so I gave him the signal that somebody was near, and he waited. As the man was getting closer, I could see that he was talking to himself, like he was arguing with someone. As he got even closer, I could see that he was at least in his 40s. He looked very dirty, with long, greasy black hair. His face was covered in dirt, and I was starting to get nervous. When the man was walking past my side, I heard Kit shout something that I was not expecting. He shouted out, "Dickhead." The man looked right towards the house in an instant, with a furious expression on his face. I was freaking out, because the man could have easily spotted me hiding behind the bins. The man started passing back and forth, with his eyes fixed on the house, looking and muttering to himself. Eventually he started walking back the way he was heading, and once he was out of my view, I got out from behind the bins and made my way over to Kit. I was about to open my mouth and tell him how stupid it was what he did, when he said something even more stupid. "Let's follow him." I told him it was a terrible idea, but as an 11-year-old kid just wanting to fit in, I agreed.
Oh my lordy, stop listening to what he's saying. Be the grown man and step up and say, this is wrong. I cannot believe he just called somebody a D-head. And you just made that man mad and angry. That's why he turned around and he started muttering something to himself. So I wouldn't dare think about following him. Because you say something like that again, he'll turn around and know who you are and chase after you, probably. This is why you should have already left, so you won't get involved with something stupid and dangerous.
We kept a fair distance from the man, but we followed him to the entrance of the bush. We hid behind a car and watched the man as he went into the woods. I wish I could say that we headed back right then, but Kit wanted to see where he was going, so we continued to follow. Kit went in first, and I followed close behind. I was walking as quietly as possible, but the leaves were all dry, and they crunched really loudly as I walked over them. After 5 minutes, Kit stopped dead in his tracks, and I heard him mutter something to himself. I walked up next to him, and just ahead behind some rocks, there was the man, crouched down, looking right at us. I didn't have time to react, because he stood up and sprinted towards us, shouting like a madman. Kit and I turned and ran screaming. I could sense the man's presence closing in on me, and I was fearing that any second he would grab me, and then that would be the end of it. Lucky for me, the man tripped and fell. I remember feeling the air move from the man's body just inches behind me. I was easily within arm's reach of him. Hearing the man fall, I slowed down. I looked back and saw him lying flat on his stomach, and he let out an angry growl. I turned and continued running. I couldn't see Kit at that point, but I could hear the crunching of leaves and branches, so I knew he was close. Eventually, we got out of the bush and started running on the road back to the house. When I got back, Kit was already there, out of breath and sweating. I started to cry due to the fear that I could have been murdered. I never spoke of this story to anyone, and Kit apparently hasn't either. I haven't stayed at Kit's house since, and now being 22 years old, I do believe that I've learned a valuable lesson of respect, and that's guided me ever since. That feeling of how close the man was to grabbing me will always haunt me, and I thank my lucky stars that he didn't get his chance to grab me. The fact that I could feel the air move from behind me means that he was really close. My deepest apologies to that man, who my friend and I mistreated.
At least now he understands what he did was wrong, and I'm glad he's apologizing and owning up to his mistake of hanging out with a big loser of a kid. Because you say anything inappropriate to an older person, they won't take it as a practical joke. They will really get furious. Because if that guy grabbed onto you, you never know what he probably would have done. slap your face like crazy for saying such things to him, or kidnap you or something. I don't know. So you just avoided a big catastrophe right there. And I'm glad that he's not hanging out with this Kit dude anymore, since he got him into real danger that day.
At the time that this happened, I was around 12 years old, and I lived in a quiet suburb in South Carolina. I used to spend hours just walking my dog around the neighborhood, because there wasn't much else to do. Back then, we had a 70-pound basset hound named Rufus, who looked kind of like a sawed-off St. Bernard. I was walking him around late in the afternoon in the fall, and it started to get dark. I was on the other end of the neighborhood from where my house was, when I first saw a beat-up, rusty red pickup truck just driving around. I didn't think a whole lot of it, because it was the South, so pickup trucks were all over the place.
That is true, but you should be careful because that person might be following you. They see somebody walking innocently with their dog. They might be potential kidnappers, or they'll follow you to where you live at and probably ransack your house. Now, I'm just thinking ahead here, so let me hit the play button and continue this story and see what happens from this point on forward, shall we?
And it didn't automatically mean anything. But as I was walking home, I saw the truck turn down a street. Then it came out the other end further down and went back the way I came from. To give you an idea of the neighborhood, it wasn't set up like regular blocks, more like a main road than a bunch of roads that all looped around and came back to the main one. At first, I just figured the guy was lost or something, and I didn't think much of it. However, as I was getting closer to my house, and it was getting darker, I saw the truck again. Another thing about my neighborhood is that even though there are a lot of houses, everyone pretty much kept to themselves. Therefore, there wasn't really anyone outside at this time of night, even though it was still fairly early. I continued walking down the road to my house, and then I saw the truck again, this time just parked on the side, facing the road I came out of. I then turned onto the road that my house was on, and it started moving, driving slowly behind me with the lights out. If you know anything about basset hounds, they're not exactly the most threatening type of dog. They're short and stubby, like a big dash hound with big ears and goofy faces. So even though Rufus was a big dog, he wasn't great for protection. They also don't walk very fast and tend to trip over their ears when they run, so I was stuck with him setting the pace. With Rufus weighing almost as much as I did, it was not like I could just pick him up and then start running either. There I was, walking down the dark road in a quiet neighborhood, with my slow dog and a creepy truck behind me. I knew I couldn't really run from it, and I doubted that anyone would hear if I screamed. Finally, I came up with a plan, even if it was a stupid one. When I got to one of the handful of lampposts on the street, I stopped and turned around. Then I just stared at the truck. It stopped moving and just sat there, about 30 feet away from me. It was as if he was trying to look like he was parked or something. I stood there and stared at that truck for what felt like forever, but it was probably only 2 or 3 minutes. Finally, after a while, the truck started moving again. It turned its lights on and then turned off down another road. Then I booked it into someone's backyard and went the rest of my way home from there. I never told my mom about that creepy truck because I knew she'd freak out and probably wouldn't let me take the dogs out alone anymore.
You know, I would have done the same thing, turn around and face their direction, and just to show that I don't like this whole following tactic that you're doing. They were probably planning on waiting for the right opportunity just to pull up right next to her and grab her, the kidnapper, or just follow to see where she lives at, like I said earlier, and maybe break into it after they're gone. But she did the right thing in standing up for herself and protecting her dog, and pretty much made the person following you give up and go down a different lane, different road. That was very clever. And also, booking it through somebody's backyard was a smart thing to do, because if you just kept on walking, I bet you them people would probably just turn around, turn the lights off, and keep on following you. And I don't care how creeped out your mom would be, I've been telling her to get the cops to locate that vehicle if you get a good description and saw the license plate. Then that person would be off the streets, and you wouldn't have to be worried about walking Rufus anymore by yourself anymore, or worried about that person showing up again while walking Rufus.
This happened a few years ago when we lived in the city. My wife and I had a place in a large building downtown. It was one of those ultra-modern places with floor-to-ceiling windows and Wi-Fi built into all of the appliances. There were many other large buildings in the area, and they were all very close together. Because of that, you could see right into several other people's places if you were looking out the window. It was kind of a creepy thing to be at home and look out the window to see a clear view of many other people just living their lives. It will come as no surprise that I like to keep the curtains closed as much as possible. We had a lot of houseplants though, so we needed to keep them open sometimes. There wasn't a lot of direct sunlight, but it was enough to keep the plants alive for the most part. After we had been there for a while, we started to get used to it, so we started leaving the curtains open more. It felt kind of claustrophobic with them closed anyway. We went about our lives for a while, and nothing much happened. One day, however, my wife came home one evening in an absolute fit. She was crying and rambling incoherently. She ran over to the window and yanked the curtains shut in a rage. I tried to calm her down, but it was absolutely futile. I could hardly understand a word she was saying. The only thing I could make out was that she keeps saying that we needed to move.
Let me guess. Someone is staring through the window and creeping her out. Hey, I would have been packing up and moving too, but I would have been confronting this person or calling the cops to go check it out. And if there's a person outside, they'll be arrested. But let me see if I'm correct on this or not.
I asked her why, but she just kept saying the same things over again. After a few minutes, she had settled down enough to explain what had happened. She told me that she had gotten an anonymous email with a link to a website where someone had been uploading hours and hours of video of us at home, taken through the windows. I wanted to see it, but she was reluctant. She didn't want to look again, but I had to know for sure. We turned on my laptop and opened the page. To my horror, she was right. One of our neighbors had been filming us at home for months. There were countless hours of us just sitting at home watching TV, making dinner, and everything else you can imagine. I slammed the laptop closed after a few minutes and walked over to the window. I peeked through the curtains and looked over to the next building. It was not obvious from the video I'd seen exactly where the camera was placed, but I had managed to narrow it down to a section of 3 or 4 apartments. Suddenly, I saw it. The glint of a camera lens from one of our neighbors' windows. That was it. The camera was there. Now that we knew where it was, I called the police. We went to the station and filed a report on the incident, but it was of little use. The police did nothing more than tell us to keep our curtains closed. I was baffled that it didn't break the law somehow, especially because we knew who it was. I should mention that my wife is actually a public figure of sorts. I won't get too specific, but she's a politician for the municipal government where we live. Not a huge celebrity or anything, but she does get recognized from time to time. I figure she was targeted because that creep recognized her. Needless to say, we moved out of that place as soon as possible.
I was just sitting here wondering why would somebody target you guys, but he just said that his wife's a politician, so they probably were spying on her just to see what she does with her husband, probably. And probably posted like on TMZ or some other tabloid video, and they're just showing you evidence that they spotted you. But man, if I got a link that had video footage of me doing stuff and it looked like it was filmed from outside of my house, that's a form of evasion of privacy right there. And the police should have took it seriously and go over to that person's apartment and tell them, you better stop filming them right now or they're going to press charges. You know, that's all you have to do. But I cannot believe the police said there's nothing they can do if the person did not physically show up at their house. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those post notifications for more Shining Gold Tales reactions like this. This has been another successful installment of Tin Man's Core Channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. That's a wrap, and have a nice day, buddy.